just speak randomly. There's so much that there is obviously to comment about and to speak about, but I'll just be as random as I can so I can cover as many points as I would like to mention. I spent a lot of my time, I spent a lot of years in the university and also practicing law, and the 8 years between 1999 and 2007 as Attorney General in Lagos State. Most of that time I criticized the federal government almost on a daily basis. And I recall that a few weeks ago I was talking to my wife and criticizing the federal government. And my wife had to remind me, but I thought you guys were now. Frankly, sometimes one tends to forget that, as they say, the buck stops somewhere around my table. But as I said to President Buhari while we were campaigning, and he said I should look at the faces of the young men who are pressing their faces against the bus that we're in Zamfara State. And he said I should look at their faces. He said, well, what do you think, what can you tell about these people? And I said, well, I really can't see much. I see that they're excited to see us. And he said, let me tell you what, as far as these people are concerned, from the second day that we're sworn in, after, if we win this election, they expect to see all their problems solved. So I said to him, it is you they expect to solve the problem. But we know that, at least today I know that, just as he reminds me constantly, we have a duty to do our very best, as honestly, as forthrightly as we can, using all of the best tools and the best things all of the best people that we can find. The question today is Nigeria rising. For me, I think there is no question at all that despite everything, our country is rising. Despite all of whatever it is that we see, our nation is rising, but it's a severely challenged nation. First thing I'd like to say is that the development of nations anywhere is based largely on an elite consensus of one kind or the other. In other words, the elite must agree that the nation or the group is worth building. The elite must agree. The professional elite, the religious elite, the political elite must agree that there is something worth doing about the nation. And the nation is worth anything at all. And that consensus has been addressed, and issues around it have been addressed both by Mero and even earlier by General Agboy. But we need to find some kind we need to find that consensus. Unfortunately, that consensus has eluded us for very, very many years. And this explains why it is that despite all that we should have achieved as a nation, we appear, as Professor Soludo has said, to be going round and round in circles. It is an elite consensus that brought the great countries of the world where they are today. When you look at just simple things like the American Constitution or even the agreements to form a union, people came together, diverse tribes, diverse races and all of that came together to say, let's agree that this enterprise is worth pursuing. Let's agree on the values. Let's agree on the minimum that we'll accept. Let's agree on a justice system. And let's agree that this justice system is one where none will be above the law. And then let's implement it rigorously. the individuals within that elite group may even disagree, as must be the case. But there must be no doubt at all in anyone's mind that unless there is within this geographical space, or this, if you like now, geopolitical space, unless we agree as to how to govern this place, as to how and what it will take to develop this country, we will always appear to be, as Professor Soludo has suggested, going round and round in circles. It's the absence of an elite consensus that has brought us to a place where people have dived into their ethnic conclaves. And just as Mero agonized, today we find some of our best minds, some of those who were great leaders in the past. I was speaking to a group of leaders from a part of the country just last week. Amongst them, retired permanent secretaries of great repute, retired professors who had taught in universities for many years. But they now came representing a little zone within a state, and for me, it was so depressing. And we find ourselves, and it is because of the failure of that elite to define for us a future and to say this is how to get to the future, that everybody is now in their tribal zones. So I made a comment recently about place of residence being more important than indigenship, and I got a whole deluge of comments. People saying only bastards will turn around and say that their ethnic groups or whatever it is may not matter. But the truth of the matter is that while we are proud of where we're from, it is impractical, completely impractical, to assume that any form of ethnic nationalism in a country such as this is what will take this country forward. Whoever it is that says, I want to go my own way, whether it is the southwest, southeast, northeast, wherever, is bound to find that the reason why Nigeria is an attractive proposition, economically at least, is because of our size. That's the reason why we're an attractive proposition. Look at all the small countries around us. The reason why we are this great country to them is because we have a huge market and the possibilities are limitless. That is the reason. So any tiny little country, when I heard, when we talk about, some of these countries, Rwanda, Botswana, and all of these countries, now, many of them are setting great examples of good governance. But when you look at actual numbers, these are tiny countries compared to Nigeria, tiny little countries compared to Nigeria in terms of actual numbers. Lagos State, is larger in terms of its economy than about 12, 13, or 14 African countries. Lagos State alone, as put together. So we're dealing with the sort of country that we're talking about is a country that has the potential to be not just the giant of Africa, but a major giant, economic giant in the world. That's the kind of country we're talking about. We can't, sometimes, the other day somebody was talking about Tanzania and all of that. And I said, look, Tanzania's IGR, its whole revenue, is still 1/6 of that of Lagos State. 1/6. I'm not talking of Nigeria, 1/6 of Lagos. So these countries, as I said, offer good example. Many times when countries do well, we're bound to speak well about them. And, a lot of these countries have shown great example. But I think it's important for us to understand that we have a duty, and here I refer to the elite, to ensure that we are able to deliver a nation. And this I think, is a challenge that we face in the coming years. As Mero has said, is a leadership question, and leadership is not just political leadership. It's not just political leadership. It's leadership. It's religious leadership. It's leadership in education. It's leadership across the whole spectrum. Now, The other thing that I'd just like to mention is with respect to what I think we may need, what I think we need to do going forward. The problem sometimes is not, and again, I like to refer to what Meru said about the capacity, about implementing our ideas. We have great policies, excellent policies, and in practically every sector we have great policies. But what seems to me to be lacking, and what I've spent a lot of time trying to address, is the whole question of the state's capacity to perform, the state's capacity to do things. Now that has nothing to do with democracy, frankly. It is more a question of what is the capacity of the state to deliver on practically anything, even to build a road, to plan, to design a road and to deliver a road, to plan, to design a bridge or railway and to deliver it. To plan a legal system that is effective, a legal system that protects private property, a legal system that is able to punish wrongdoing, and that can do so speedily, swiftly, and at least in a manner that is considered fair by most. It is that capacity that I believe we need to spend a lot of time developing. We need to develop that capacity. When you look at it, and some people say, oh, it's rich people who escape justice in Nigeria. It's not true. The truth is that everybody escapes justice in Nigeria, everybody, whether they are rich or poor. There's nobody who doesn't escape justice. If you look at our numbers in prisons, if you look at the prison numbers, just as an example, at the moment we have just over 12,000 convicted prisoners in Nigeria, just over 12,000 in all of our prisons put together, just over 12,000, and we are 170 million people. America has about double our number, 300 million people, and they have 2.2 million people in jail, 2.2 million compared to 12,000. So it's either we are very well behaved people, that we have that kind of a small number, or there's something wrong with the system. So really the question is one of developing the capacity, and we need to work hard on developing the capacity. I think Professor Soludo talked about institutions, about building institutions, but all those things can be done, in my view, and a lot of time, we're spending a lot of time thinking through this and trying to work through this. How do we ensure that we can deliver the kind of capacity that can do most of the things that we need to get done? And I think that one of the very important areas is fixing our justice system. Education is absolutely important. There's no running away. There's no way you can build a serious economy without investing in education. But not just investing in education. What exactly are the strategies? What exactly are we trying to do? What types of people are we trying to produce? What type of students are we trying to produce? We've been in debates and all sorts of questions around what can we do with our educational system. My frank approach to it, and the way that I've tried to push this, is that you don't necessarily need to fix the entire educational system all at once, but you must have clear goals, clear pathways. Where do we want to get to? One important issue today is technology, and technology is crucial for agriculture, for manufacturing, for everything. It's crucial, and we must deal with education and how it will affect and how it will encourage and increase technological capacity. So our policies beginning from primary school must be policies that encourage the use of technology, encourage creativity and innovation in technology. So we cannot have primary schools where people are not taught, where people are not encouraged to use technology and are not taught programming, for example. That's where we must start from. And the truth is that we can't start it everywhere. We simply don't have the capacity to do it everywhere. But we must be able to, we must decide that we must start, that we must start this kind of educational curriculum in several different places where the capacity already exists, either in terms of resources or whatever. But we must begin. We can't wait until we have enough money to do this. So that's just primary education. Teacher training is absolutely crucial. We've got to be able to get our teachers trained in a manner that reflects what our objectives are, our educational objectives are, and where we intend to go in the next few years. We're looking now at teacher training. We're looking at how to improve that. First, we're encouraging education by giving scholarships. Technology, we're giving scholarships. I'm sure those of us who listen to the budget speech, we're giving scholarships for science, technology, engineering, and maths, as well as for education. This is to encourage education, but teacher training, changing the curriculum is absolutely important. We have a team now that's working seriously on issues of teacher training, trying to take a second look at what is really required to train the kinds of teachers that will make a real difference in the lives of children, and will work with the objectives and policies of government to be able to achieve to be able to get us to where we want to go in the next few years. There's also for the present government the whole question of what Professor Soludo described as compassionate provisions in the budget. Frankly, I'm not so sure that it's just a matter of compassion, and in that respect, I do not think that's a matter of compassion. As a matter of fact, my sense of this is that when we prepare our budgets in Nigeria, we've always tended, and economic policy generally, we've always tended to approach it, almost from the perspective of a middle-income country, of a country that has everything in place. And so what we need to do is to tweak the fiscals here and there, have some indices right, and hopefully if industry can move us forward, we'll provide enough wealth for everybody. But the truth is that it probably accounts for the reason why poverty continues, because we have 110 million extremely poor people, and they're getting poorer by the day. And despite all of our GDP growth figures, somehow or the other, we just, the poverty numbers continue to increase. So my sense is that unless we're able to address those questions, first of all directly, not as a matter of compassion, but as a matter of economic survival, because really, if you have 110 million poor people, and you're extremely poor people, and you don't have some kind of social protection or social investment, we are merely waiting for doomsday. We're waiting for doomsday, because how quickly can our economy generate what is required to answer to the problems of these very poor people? And I think that when you look at it, what we've tried to do in the budget is basically to look at, for example, the 500,000 teachers that we're trying to get. These are graduates who are basically out of school. We need to retrain them and put them back and put them into teaching. Now, the retraining itself will take probably about 4 months or so, or 5 months, because they're already graduates. So basically what you're taking them through is just pedagogy. There's no, they already are, in some senses, knowledgeable enough about what they're doing. But it answers two questions. For us, it fills in a gap because there's a huge shortage of teachers, especially teachers in the sciences, a huge shortage of teachers. Secondly, it puts these people to work, and they're working, at least it puts them to work, and they're earning some pay, but most importantly, they are working, they're able to work, and they're improving our educational system. We're also looking at providing technical and vocational education for non-graduates, artisans and all that. And as we provide for them, trying to give them real opportunities. And we're looking at doing 700,000 as part of the 500 billion which we're setting aside for social investments. Part of this also is the conditional cash transfer for the very poorest. But we're looking at that in phases. We're looking at giving conditional cash transfers for those who have children, for the very poorest who have children in school and who are participating in immunization. The truth is that these categories of people are people who are more or less alienated. And the more of our people that are alienated, the worse for us. We can't today, account for the numbers in the way, we just can't account for the large numbers of those who are completely out of reckoning. We were looking at, the other day we were looking at the figures of market women because we're looking at how to effectively give loans to market women, microcredit loans to market women across the country in order to improve their inventory and also do some financial planning and all that. We're looking at that with the Bill Gates people, with Mero and Co. and the World Bank. And also we're putting in some resources into it. But we believe that we must, these are small scale enterprises. We believe that we must do something about about improving what it is they do and hoping that they can be more productive. The point that Professor Soludo has made about bypassing manufacturing is an important point, because of course for many, we recognize that the old tricks still work, as they say, from farming to factory and all that. It's very difficult today, and I have not seen the model yet that has managed to bypass manufacturing and succeed. I think that we need to pay particular attention to manufacturing. And that's going to involve offending to some extent some of our WTO allegiances and all of that, because some protectionism is necessary. Some subsidized credits will be necessary. We just have to take steps that will encourage manufacturing, encourage local industry. We really have no choice but to take some of those steps. Again, agriculture, because power, agriculture and all of that, we need to do quite a bit of work in that area. Agriculture, is crucial, and all the challenges that you mentioned are challenges that we really have to take on board, especially desertification. And we note, of course, that in these areas, these are the bread basket, if you like, of Nigeria, and we have to deal with issues of erosion and desertification quickly if our agricultural plans will not be jeopardized. But we're looking at the use of improved seedlings, especially for rice production, wheat production, and all of that. Improving acreage in agriculture, and then trying to service that whole value chain. Of course, getting the private sector involved directly in agriculture, they had their fingers burnt at different times. So there's a bit of reluctance. But I think that it's becoming more obvious with the fall in oil prices. It's becoming more obvious that we have to do something about agriculture, and even the private sector has to come and work in agriculture and do a bit more down that whole value chain. I'll just leave power. We, of course, have to deal with that and all other infrastructural issues, just so that I can round up and conclude. The budget, the budget. Frankly, I'm sure that if you had heard any of my comments before the budget, before we actually began the budget process, I was saying that a minimum of 8 trillion was what we required. But frankly, if you just look at the figures, and I'm going to, as I said, I've already said I'm going to come and consult with Professor Soludo again, how we can get, to this 20 trillion. Because just looking at the figures, we have a deficit of over 2.2 trillion, as you noticed, 37% deficit. Our debt to revenue was already 38%. Which meant that we're already over what is considered safe, heading for the 40s. Now, if we had increased, because again, the only way is either we ramp up, domestic revenue mobilization, get our FIRS and all that to work in terms of revenue, work the customs and all of that. Those are our main non-oil resources. Some people said increase VAT. The argument about, we're the lowest VAT in Africa or anywhere, we need to move from 5% to 10% and all of that. But why? What prevailed, the argument that prevailed is, look, at the moment you are collecting 20% of those vertible products. You are collecting 20% only. Why don't you just increase that? Before you start trying to increase, before you start trying to increase VAT, first increase your coverage, and then we can start talking about increasing. Which is a way we thought would increase revenue. But the point of the matter, though, is that if you have deficit at 2.3 trillion, and you have to borrow for the rest or for most of what we're borrowing about 1.8 trillion. Now, if you're borrowing 1.8 trillion, some of that is from the domestic market, which already, as you know, is where we're almost busting in the seams in the domestic market. The ceiling is there. We are crowding out the private sector already. Everybody is complaining. So we have a problem there. And then, of course, borrowing from we have a ceiling in our foreign borrowing. We still have some headroom there. So we can still borrow a bit more there. But for me, the problem really is how do you move from, even if you are going to borrow, how much can you possibly borrow? And realistically, we're thinking that non-oil revenues, we're looking at, in fact, they say it's ambitious, we're looking at 35 to 40% increase in non-oil revenues. Now, some people say that's conservative, some people say it's too high. But if we look at that 35% in non-oil revenues, add that to our borrowings, we're still, not able to go beyond where we are in terms of the size of the budget. But I agree with you that what we really need is a much bigger budget, because even if you look at infrastructure alone, we have huge requirements in infrastructure. Our recurrent has remained basically flat, because we are not increasing recurrent much. In fact, we're not increasing, and of course, most of the recurrent is salaries and wages, not even overheads. It's really salaries and wages. Now, the only way to deal with salaries and wages, as you know, is a political question. And I think you rightly pointed out that we are not about to be taking on those kinds of issues right away. But having said so, frankly, my belief is that with the budget that we have, if we're able to raise the resources and spend what we hope to spend on capital, and we spend it well on capital, and we're focused and disciplined, we would have set ourselves in the right place for a much bigger budget in the next cycle. I think that this is really where we can start from. But for me, the most important thing is delivering, the capacity to even use what we have and to deliver on what we have. That capacity to deliver, as I say, to absorb the resources and use the resources wisely. I'd like to say that the country, in my view, is at an interesting point, an interesting juncture. And I think that we are all set, in my view, we're all set for